bore you with the reasons. I will give you the bottom line. Because UFOs, and I didn't mean this as a pun, but UFOs don't stand still. We either have to try to interpret moving points of light, or objects, or personal accounts of interactions with whoever is manning or piloting these vehicles. Or, much worse, we have to depend on the government to tell us the truth. Yes, we have about as much chance of that as, well, fill in the blank. So what I have focused on, and what this investigation has focused on for the last 25 years, has been something that does stand still, i.e. the ruins. The ruins that are out there. Ruins that we have now discovered on the moon, on Mars, on some of the satellites of the outer solar system. We even have one bizarre asteroid called Steins that we did an analysis of and published on Enterprise a year or so ago, which showed amazing features indicative of intelligent design. And what this has created for those observations, for that eyewitness testimony, then you will never get to the bottom of this extraordinarily important and history-changing field. And the death of Walter Cronkite, my mentor, and friend, and colleague, and someone that I was incredibly lucky to have worked with all those many years ago, because it gave me a background in how to interpret information and data that is pretty important about sourcing, more than one source, and let's depend not, if we can, on government sources. All of that took place about a month ago, and it was in the throes of all that that I began looking at some images that showed some really amazing and astonishing things. And those images are what I'm going to show you this evening. Ostensibly, this talk is supposed to be about the secret space program. Well, that has several meanings. At one level, it's the program that NASA is conducting, and other governments, the Russians, the European Space Agency, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Indians. Everybody is suddenly going to the moon. Isn't that interesting? I mean, there's nothing there. Why are third world nations that can't feed their people sending priceless equipment, very expensive technology, and ultimately planning to send men and women to a place where there's nothing to look at, nothing of value? Well, the obvious answer is there is something. They're just not telling us what it is. But beyond that, the secret space program that most everyone associates with that phrase has to do with activities that perhaps are a little more sophisticated than rockets, a little more out there, a little... And yet these photographs are clear evidence that it is. So how to resolve the enigma? Well, what I did was I began looking through the JPL computer system for the simulations, moment by moment, of when the photographs were taken. As you can see, this is something called the Solar System Simulator. It's on NASA, it's on JPL. Just go to the JPL website and you will find it, or Google Solar System Simulator. Remember, Google is your friend. And you will find this geometry for this time and date on the 26th, showing the relative location of everything in the Saturn system, up to and including some things that aren't, like the Pioneer 10 spacecraft, which, as you know, is leaving the solar system, with a plaque that Eric Burgess and I suggested to NASA, and Carl Sagan actually got it done and put on the spacecraft. That is in this recreation. That's exactly where Pioneer 10 was the moment the Cassini photographed this incredible geometric ring system on the afternoon of the 26th. Now we go a little closer, and right here is the arc of photographs that I have most heavily focused upon, which show the most amazing geometry. We do not know whether the whole ring itself has this geometry or just a portion. At the moment, it appears to be just a portion, which brings up some other things that we'll get to in a minute. But this then is the geometry of the photographs, a series of images, still images taken and mosaic together that span about this much of an arc, as you can see at the outer edge of Saturn's densest ring, the so that in fact these are now different portions, and you can see that these ring details have intricate geometry in and among themselves, but they also seem to exist in at least 4 separate layers. Because as you can see by looking at the geometry here, if I go back one more, see, this is not a very useful gadget. If you're looking at this geometry, it's obvious that you're looking up with the spacecraft kind of under the rings, looking up overhead at an angle of something like 30 degrees, which means we are looking at the edge itself, and that in turn tells us that we have to be looking into a box. We have to be looking into the side of the beam. Terriers, because the physics was different. The hyperdimensional physics of the solar system drastically fell, reducing the size of creatures, large and small, of all kinds of species, which of course explains very elegantly and simply why the dinosaurs and their companions were of such prodigious scale, and why we, comparatively speaking, and all of the creatures on the earth, bar a few, like whales in the ocean, where gravity can be counteracted by buoyant forces. In the various cultural memories and archives and writings of ancient cultures all around the world. And the structure seems related to this stuff. Like if you follow this one out, you get right here. You follow this one out, you get right here. This one goes right up here. So we're looking at something which is spread vertically across these decks, these layers, these levels, these floors. And that cannot in any way, shape, or form, because by the means G. So you can make it of steel or carbon or diamond or spaghetti, and it doesn't matter because it doesn't have to have much structural strength in order to persist. And then what you do is you put a covering on it so that it kind of looked like the rings. And from a distance, there'd be no way to tell which was which. This is the geometry of the photographs. This is looking at that edge, this three-dimensional structure, the edge of a box, the wide angle showing this amazing, I mean, we would love to have better close-ups showing this ragged material right in here, because obviously this apparent rift is really not a 2D rift, it's a 3D edge where there has been significant erosion. Here's a slightly closer view. Now I found this sculptress in Australia. Funny how Australia is coming up again and again tonight. Her name is Inga King. She apparently is a very famous Australian sculptress, and she created in a park this amazing tour de force called, obviously, Saturn's rings. The reason this is important is because you can see the play of light against the rings. If you look at the reflections, if you look at the edge, the 3D edge, if you look at the surface shadowing, notice in this section of the outer edge of the B-ring, there's nothing interesting at all. If we enlarge a portion of it, we've got lots of linear detail in the B-ring itself, particles moving along. By the way, when I said earlier about Keplerian orbits, the reason that they're important is because if you have two objects orbiting anything else, the sun, two moons orbiting a planet, two green particles orbiting Saturn, the inner particle, the inner object, the inner thing, will orbit faster. With the portion of the rings which has the jet. Look at the difference. This is what we expected to see. This is what we are seeing, but not all the way around the ring. So what is this telling us? It's telling me one of two things. Either the geometry structured artificial ring world segment is relatively small and confined to one portion of the rings, or it's relatively small and confined to maybe two or three portions scattered around the ring's circumference, and in between is normal ring stuff, which looks like, on the photographs, normal ring stuff. If you begin to match these bands carefully, and I tried to do this, but I probably could do a better job when I held more time, you can see that there appears to be missing stuff at the edge which is complete here. What's in fragments here, and it's those fragments sticking up that are casting the shadows on the ring. One model to explain this is that what we're seeing here is the normal structure, which has some kind of roof or glass enclosure or covering, Golden Gate Bridge. Now the reason that these two things look similar is because in terms of structural engineering, let me go back, this is how they're made. This is a box beam construction. You produce a number of these, you layer them behind each other, they form the whatever they are, planes of light. They look to me on some of the lesser eroded areas like sheets of glass reflecting light at a particular angle. Here we can see now this close-up, you can see individual structures that form these long shadows. You can see clustering of objects next to each other, and again these aligned little guys that are obviously part of something that used to extend from here all the way down. Notice the edge here. Notice the width of this edge and the sharpness of it in comparison to this natural ringlet, which can be seen up here. If it was new, if you were inside it, this is what it might have looked like. Except the curve is in the wrong direction. Remember, this is a model of a ring world structure which curves up, because you have to spin it. Whereas here, the ring is curved down, because it's going all the way around the planet, maybe, or maybe not. And we don't think centrifugal force is involved. It lives here, at the edge of the Cassini division, and we do not know at the moment if it goes completely around or in fact only was in one or a few small parts. Now some of you may be familiar with a computer game called Halo, which is a direct ripoff from Larry and Ring World. What's interesting is that the idea of ring worlds has now permeated cultural democracy, to the extent that young folks, kids, playing video games are more likely to resonate with what we're seeing at Saturn than maybe any other demographic group. Saturn's B ring appears to be an endless suspension bridge circling Saturn, held together by, we don't know what yet, but ordinary steel or carbon nanotubes or things like that would be overwhelmingly obvious as structural materials and would work. Because remember, this is not spinning separately, it is in orbit and is therefore in zero gravity orbital tension. Right there. At 1.95 radii of Saturn out from the center of the planet. This is now a color sequence taken in the infrared showing that there is something compositionally different. This is now real physics. There's something different about that edge than the rest of the ring. See how bluish this is? That indicates different composition or size or whatever. But yellow, in the infrared sequence they took to produce this picture, indicates that something about that edge has a different chemical composition. This is now just going in and enlarging. And you can see that there is the incipient hint of some kind of structure, again, in this section of the rings. Because the structure part seems to go from here to here, that first dark area behind this edge. Notice, by the way, how bright this is and how dark this is. If this was an edge facing sunlight, it would be bright, like it is. And this is what it looks like in some portions when you look at it in detail. It cannot be there, yet it is. And I believe it was part of a grand experiment to basically turn Saturn into the most powerful torsion field amplifier in this solar system. If that's true, then we're looking down quintessentially on the hyperdimensional fluid physics of a planet which has been altered, which has been tampered with, which has been turned into a huge planetary machine by means of this technology, by means of the remnants of whatever we see here, arcing along the edge of that most mysterious and densest ring. Now, is this what, if you went inside when it was functioning, it would look like? Are we actually talking about a structure to create high voltage that would then accelerate charged particles? Which brings us to the work of a dear friend and colleague of mine, Joseph Farrell. Because what Joseph has done is to delve into the various aspects of what the Nazis were up to in their frantic last-minute effort to win the war some 60 years ago. A set of projects, super classified, black ops projects, one of which was called the Nazi Bell. The Bell now, if you read Joseph's meticulous documentation and the paperwork and the papers that were leaked out of East Germany with the fall of the wall and all that, it's unquestionably clear now that the Bell was in fact a primitive torsion field generator that the Nazis were using to look at the effects of torsion field technology. And one of the things they found in the literature was the dramatic and absolutely pernicious effects that uncontrolled torsion experiments have on time and living systems and scientists and engineers who were too close, who died horrible deaths because they didn't understand what was really going on, and the fact that biology and torsion fields are intimately connected. And if you light up a massive torsion field generator in the room, if you don't know what you're doing, you will not only kill yourself, but you will kill a lot of other people and change the environment for decades, if not centuries, because torsion can be held in memory by other materials. One of the guys who inadvertently found out about torsion is Wernher von Braun. He didn't find out about it because it was part of the Bell experiment, at least as far as we know. He found out about it because he launched a satellite, 50 years ago, +1, the first satellite, Explorer 1, and noticed effects that he tried for the rest of his life to understand. And the story of this is published on the web as von Braun's 50-year-old secret on Enterprise. I strongly recommend you read it because I'm about to finish the series with part 3, with some new things we have discovered that connect with this. Well, what von Braun found was when he launched Explorer 1 that night in '58, It went into an orbit some 600 miles higher than the rockets of his era could have allowed that satellite to reach. 600 vertical miles of something, energy, velocity, momentum, from nowhere. Not explained. Oh, and the same thing also happened to Vanguard, and they didn't understand what was going on with that either. The whole story is on the web, so I won't go into it in detail here. The point is that von Braun had a face-to-face confrontation with the effects of torsion in the behavior of orbiting objects, orbiting a massive planet, which of course is why I believe firmly that he ultimately connected what he was seeing in his own data, in his own engineering, with the phenomenology of Saturn, which we'll get to momentarily, and that's what wound up him calling, in a very ungrammatical phrase, the most massive rocket ever built on planet Earth, which took men from Earth, from the United States to the moon, by calling it the Saturn V, a scale of which can be judged by comparing von Braun next to the F-1 engine bells that are at the base of this incredible battleship-sized rocket that weighed as much as a destroyer and could carry 3 men to and from the moon. It was not called Saturn, I believe now, by accident. It was a project worthy of the late 20th century, a pale echo in the mythology of these guys, a German secret society called the Brotherhood of Saturn, which I believe, and other scholars like Jordan Maxwell believe, has had a controlling impact, not only on the physics and technology of suppression of torsion energies and exploration and research, but has actually shaped the politics of the world we currently cannot seem to understand, including why the whole UFO phenomenology has to be kept a deep, dark secret, unacknowledged officially by anyone. Jim Marrs has written another book called The Rise of the Fourth Reich, which goes into the politics and legal background of the torsion field experiments of the Bell. After these experiments at the end of World War II, and in fact, is this a third force in the world, in geopolitics right now, a group of terrestrial human beings who have mastered such technologies and such science that they, in essence, have become a separate and parallel civilization. Wormholes that will allow you to transit interstellar distances in minutes or hours, as opposed to decades and thousands of years for conventional rocket technology. In other words, can we trace all of this back to the bifurcation of civilization and one group of fanatics basing their philosophies on an ancient and secret history of the technology of this because it's taboo, it's verboten. We cannot, the governments of the world cannot acknowledge A, UFO phenomenology, and B, they damn well can't acknowledge that they can't control it because it's a part of us that has grown uncontrollably powerful in the midst of the end of the last great war. Now, evidence for this comes in this form. A part of this section of the rings, this amazingly enhanced version of this 3D geometry, this portion appears to be pretty much all destroyed, and we've only got these inner two guys. This part's all gone now. It seems to have evened out, it's just rubble. This is a shadow of the moon, by the way. Is this little guy. I mean, I looked at this and I said, wait a minute, what does that do to me? And why does it have this kind of interesting geometry with one dominant bright guy and two little outliers? This is a star, all right? This could be a cosmic ray hit or not, but this geometric configuration just cannot be accidental. Neither is the fact that Cassini took the picture and whatever it was, and I think it may be an actual vehicle of unusual design, was kind of hanging out next to the rings. Almost like it knew and they're keeping track. Because I don't believe NASA's the real space agency. I haven't for some time. I think it's the best false front western town that money can buy. That after 40 plus years of doing this stuff, and we're no better than rockets? 40 years! For God's sake! Just look at the data, look at the experiments, look at Kozarev, look at De Palma, look at von Braun. No. This, to me, is why they're coming down like the proverbial ton of bricks on poor McKinnon. They must make an example so no one ever again, with much more sophisticated technology and much more sophisticated people and politically savvy people, and now the internet worldwide where data would get out instantly and would not be censorable. They are determined to make an object lesson of him so no bright-eyed kid thinks of doing what he did, or they'll end up in jail for the rest of their life. It's obviously to throw cold water on the democratic process of trying to open the door on what is really going on vis-a-vis the secret space program. Now, the evidence I have that there is in fact a secret space program, and it's ours. It's not ETs, it's not aliens, it's humans, probably Nazis, probably with a lead time of at least 60 years on all the rest of us, is a few things that happened in the shuttle program that we can talk about because we've somehow been given the opportunity to see the data. One night in 1991, in September, over Australia at 19.5 degrees, this happened. This amazing object appeared over the horizon of the Earth. This is the air globe. The actual physical horizon of the Earth is down here. It appeared, it tracked along the horizon, in a curve along the horizon. Then a flash occurs in the video. It dashes off into space, obviously at incredible speed, 200,000 G acceleration. And something like a beam weapon or a plasma bolt or whatever goes shooting off into space at some interesting angle to the flight path of this mysterious object. Now, people like James Oberg and the other NASA apologists say, it's just hydrogen